In the small kitchen, Patricia sat at a table cluttered with bills and job advertisements. The dim light filtering through the window did little to dispel the oppressive feeling that surrounded her. The piles of papers and unpaid bills seemed to multiply with each passing day, and with every new rejection, Patricia's anxiety grew. Patricia, a young woman of 28, had a fragile appearance but a determination that belied her physique. Her light brown hair fell softly over her shoulders, and her green eyes reflected a mixture of weariness and resolve. She had grown up in an orphanage, learning from an early age to depend solely on herself. This forced independence had made her a strong and capable woman, but it had also left her alone in moments like this, when she needed someone to share her worries with. The last few days had been particularly hard. Patricia had started to experience constant dizziness, and her body, increasingly frail, demanded medical attention she couldn't afford. The desperation to find a job had become more acute, but every door she knocked on seemed to close before her. Frustration and helplessness consumed her, but she couldn't afford to give up. As she went over the job advertisements once more, her phone rang, breaking the silence of the room. She glanced at the screen and saw an unknown number. With a flicker of hope, she answered. "Good afternoon. My name is Valentina," said an authoritative voice on the other end of the line. "I'm looking for a nurse to care for my husband. Your services were recommended to us." Patricia felt a small spark of hope ignite within her. It had been a long time since she had secured a position as a nurse, accepting any job she could find. Although she didn't recall sending her resume for this particular vacancy, the opportunity was too good to pass up. "Yes, of course. I'm very interested in working as a caregiver," she replied, trying to remain calm. "Could you give me more details?" "My husband, Mr. Carlos, has heard about you. We need someone with your experience urgently. Could you come to the mansion today for an interview?" Patricia readily agreed. Excitement for the opportunity mingled with nervousness as she prepared for the interview. Upon arriving at the imposing Alencar mansion, she was greeted by Valentina, a woman of rigid posture and a calculating expression. During the interview, the woman didn't seem to have genuine concern for her husband's health, which aroused Patricia's suspicion. "Mr. Carlos was diagnosed with a rare disease," Valentina explained coldly. "The doctors say he has only a few months to live, but I think they're exaggerating." Patricia felt a pang of compassion for the man, but the way Valentina spoke of him, almost as if his life didn't matter, made her deeply uncomfortable. "I would like to meet Mr. Carlos, if possible," said Patricia, fearing that the wife might be harming him. Before they could continue, a man in gardener's clothes mistakenly entered the room, interrupting the conversation. Upon seeing the man, Valentina reacted with evident disdain. "Don't you have eyes? Get out of here immediately," shouted Valentina. The gardener seemed ashamed and his shoulders slumped at the reprimand. Patricia felt uneasy with the situation and looked at the man with pity, but kept her focus on her purpose of assessing Mr. Carlos's situation. "Please, I think it's important to see Mr. Carlos before anything else." Led to Mr. Carlos's room, Patricia barely had time to introduce herself when she noticed something was wrong. They found the patient in bed, coughing violently, struggling for air. His face was completely pale, straining to breathe. Patricia rushed to his side, adjusting his position to facilitate breathing and patting his back gently. "He's not breathing," she murmured, taking charge of the situation. Carefully, Patricia turned him slightly, fearing he might die. She began to perform CPR until the man gasped for air again. Patricia felt grateful to have arrived on time and let out a sigh of relief. "Is he all right now?" Patricia asked worriedly after the crisis had passed. Mr. Carlos, still breathless, managed a weak smile of gratitude. "You have the hands of an angel, thank you," he replied in a faint voice. The man had a pale face and seemed too thin, almost as if he wasn't being cared for properly. In his 60s, Carlos clearly showed the signs of his advanced age and illness. His skin was thin and wrinkled, and his movements were slow and painful. His green eyes, still bright despite his condition, seemed to pay attention to everything about Patricia, grateful for having his life saved. Patricia thought about how Mr. Carlos had the same intense green eyes as her, but quickly dismissed the thought, focusing on her task. "I'm glad you're all right, Mr. Carlos," she replied, giving him a smile. Valentina, observing the scene from the doorway, looked visibly uncomfortable. "It seems you've done something good, Patricia," she said curtly. "However, I believe I can take care of my husband myself. He's getting better. It was just an accident." "I want her to be my nurse. I still have a say in this house," argued Mr. Carlos, indignant at his wife's attitude. "Patricia, I want you to take the job. You saved my life." Patricia, though relieved to have helped, felt the weight of the situation. "I will do my best for Mr. Carlos," she replied, looking at the man's wife. "If you don't mind, I would like to have a full-time position due to his health condition. If there is a room, even a small place where I can stay to look after him, even this chair is enough for me." "Stay as long as you need," said the grateful man, looking at Patricia once more before turning to his wife. "Valentina, accommodate her in our best guest room. It's the least I can do to thank her for what she did," he ordered. Weeks later, Patricia had settled into her routine with Mr. Carlos. The mansion, initially intimidating, had become a familiar place where every corner held an echo of her careful and dedicated steps. However, with each passing day, she felt her own health slowly deteriorating. The weakness she experienced was persistent and worrisome. Patricia worked tirelessly, ensuring that Carlos received the best possible care. Despite Valentina's constant coldness, Patricia remained committed to her patient's well-being. Over time, the relationship between her and Carlos began to transform. The long hours of care and conversation created a tacit bond, a silent understanding manifested in glances and small gestures. One afternoon, as Patricia was helping Carlos take his medicine, he broke the silence with a tenuous voice, but laden with emotion. "Patricia, have you ever lost someone close?" he asked, his green eyes fixed on her with an intensity that surprised her. Patricia, without stopping her task, answered softly. "I grew up in an orphanage, Mr. Carlos. I never knew my parents, so I can't say I've lost someone close because I never had someone like that." Carlos nodded slowly, as if he deeply understood her answer. "I had a daughter, but she disappeared when she was very young. I never knew what happened to her, and that has been a burden on my heart ever since." Carlos's comment resonated deeply with Patricia. The sadness in his voice and the evident loss in his eyes moved her in a way she hadn't expected. As their conversations continued, Patricia couldn't help but notice how Carlos looked at her with a mixture of hope and melancholy, as if he saw in her a reflection of the daughter he had lost. Over time, Patricia began to observe small details that had previously gone unnoticed. She noticed the way Carlos spoke to her, the warmth in his voice that contrasted with the coldness he showed towards others, including Valentina. There was a familiarity in their interactions that made her feel a strange kind of belonging. One day, as they were walking in the garden, Patricia decided to ask more about Carlos's daughter. "What was she like? Your daughter, I mean." Carlos sighed. a mixture of sadness and tenderness on his face. She was a very special girl. She had green eyes, just like yours. She was always full of life, running around and laughing. But one day, when she was only 3 years old, she disappeared. It was as if the earth had swallowed her whole. We never found a clear clue as to what happened to her. Patricia felt a lump in her throat. It must have been very hard for you and your family. Carlos nodded, his eyes shining with unshed tears. It was. I lost a part of myself that day, and even though many years have passed, the pain has never gone away. But in you, Patricia, I see something of her. I don't know if it's just a coincidence, but your presence gives me a peace I haven't felt in a long time. Carlos's words echoed in her mind for days. She couldn't ignore the growing feeling that there was more to her relationship with Carlos than either of them knew. But there was also a constant shadow in the form of Valentina, whose coldness towards Carlos and Patricia became increasingly evident and suspicious. Patricia began to suspect that Valentina had ulterior motives. She watched as Valentina administered Carlos's medication with an indifference that unsettled her. The way Valentina seemed more interested in financial matters than her husband's health only heightened her suspicions. Despite her concerns, Patricia had no concrete evidence and decided to keep her observations to herself for the time being. She continued to care for Carlos with dedication, strengthening her bond with him and feeling an inexplicable connection that only deepened with time. Days passed slowly, each one bringing a mix of hope and fear. Patricia continued to feel weak, but her determination to care for Carlos kept her going. She was beginning to realize that she wasn't just caring for a patient, but discovering a part of herself she had never known. The time they spent together became a refuge for both of them. Carlos shared stories of his youth, his dreams, and his regrets, while Patricia listened intently, feeling that every word built a bridge between their souls. The feeling of belonging grew, and with it, the need to unravel the mystery of their connection. One night, after Carlos had fallen asleep, Patricia stayed in the living room reflecting on everything she had discovered and felt. The mansion was silent, but her mind was racing with questions and suspicions. She knew she had to find the truth, not just for Carlos, but for herself as well. And with that resolve, she prepared to face whatever came her way, knowing that her life, and perhaps Carlos's, would change forever with the answers she sought. Days turned into weeks, and Carlos's condition showed no signs of improvement. Patricia observed with growing concern how his fragility became more pronounced with each passing day. Valentina, on the other hand, grew increasingly distant, interested only in her husband's legal and financial affairs. One morning, as Patricia was giving Carlos his medication, Valentina entered the room accompanied by a lawyer. The tension in the air was palpable, and Patricia felt a wave of apprehension as she saw Valentina's cold and calculating expression. "Carlos, we need to talk about the will," Valentina said without preamble, gesturing to the lawyer who carried a thick folder of documents. Carlos, visibly weak, barely managed to lift his head to look at his wife. "This is not the time, Valentina," he murmured hoarsely. "I don't feel well." "That's precisely why we need to do it now," Valentina insisted. "I want to make sure everything is in order." Patricia, standing by the bed, felt a surge of anger and helplessness. She knew that Carlos was in no condition to make important decisions, and Valentina's insistence only reinforced her suspicions that there was more at stake. "I don't think it's appropriate to pressure Mr. Carlos in this state," Patricia said, trying to remain calm. "He needs to rest and regain his strength." Valentina turned to her, her eyes cold and calculating. "It's not your place to decide that, Patricia. This is a family matter." The lawyer, sensing the tension, intervened. "Mr. Carlos, we just need your signature here," he said, approaching the bed with the document and a pen. Carlos tried to sit up, but his body wouldn't respond. Patricia helped him up, her eyes filled with concern. "Don't sign anything, Carlos," Patricia said firmly. "You need to fully understand what you're signing." "That's enough," Valentina exclaimed, her voice sharp. "Patricia, get out of here immediately." "I won't go," Patricia replied, her voice trembling with determination. "Carlos is in no condition to make this decision now." Valentina advanced towards Patricia, her face a mask of contained fury. "I told you to leave. Don't make me call security." At that moment, Carlos, making a titanic effort, managed to utter a few words. "Patricia, please, stay." Carlos' statement only seemed to enrage Valentina further. "This is ridiculous. You have no say in this, Carlos. You will sign the document right now." The lawyer, sensing the escalating conflict, looked from Valentina to Carlos, clearly uncomfortable. "Mr. Carlos, do you wish to proceed with the signing?" Carlos, exhausted and desperate, tried to take the pen, but his hand trembled uncontrollably. Patricia, seeing his struggle, intervened once more. "You can't do this, Valentina. This isn't right." Valentina, losing her patience, shouted, "Be quiet! You've caused enough trouble already. Security!" 2 security guards entered the room at Valentina's call. "Get this woman out of here. She's interfering with private matters." Patricia tried to resist, but the guards held her firmly and dragged her out of the room. "Carlos, don't sign anything. Please, don't do it," she cried out as she was pulled down the hallway. Valentina turned to the lawyer with a satisfied smile. "Now, let's get this over with." Carlos, with no strength left to fight, slumped back on the bed. The effort had been too much for him, and his vision began to blur. "I can't," he murmured, before losing consciousness. Patricia, once outside the mansion, felt devastated. She knew she had to do something to protect Carlos, but her mind was blank. She couldn't let Valentina get away with this. Desperate for a solution, she decided to take a moment to collect her thoughts and plan her next move. She sat down on a nearby bench, trying to calm her breathing and think clearly. The sun was beginning to set as Patricia stood up with newfound determination. She knew that the only way to ensure Carlos's safety was to return to the mansion and gather evidence that could prove Valentina's manipulation. Determined, she walked back towards the mansion, hoping to find some clue that could help her. However, she decided she would do it the following day, with a clear mind and a well-thought-out plan. Upon arriving, she was greeted by Rosa, the family's trusted housekeeper. Rosa, a middle-aged woman with a kind face, had always shown sympathy for Patricia and was genuinely concerned for Carlos's well-being. "Rosa, I need your help," Patricia said in a low voice, glancing around to make sure they weren't overheard. "Carlos is in danger, and I need to find proof that Valentina is manipulating everything." Rosa nodded in understanding. "Patricia, I know Valentina doesn't have good intentions. I've seen things I don't like, but I didn't know what to do. I'll help you however I can." Together, they began searching Carlos's office and his room, looking for any indication of Valentina's activities. It was then, upon opening an old drawer, that Patricia found a wooden box containing old photographs. One of the photos immediately caught her attention. A young girl with intense green eyes, very much like hers, The discovery left her breathless. She felt an inexplicable connection to the image, and her mind began to fill with questions. Could it be possible that she was Carlos's lost daughter? The idea seemed far-fetched, but she couldn't ignore the resemblance. "Rosa, look at this," said Patricia, showing her the picture. "Do you know this girl?" Rosa looked at the photo, and her eyes welled up with sadness. "Yes, Patricia. That's Sophia, Carlos's daughter. She disappeared many years ago. She was just a child." Patricia's heart pounded in her chest. "Rosa, I have to go to the hospital and talk to Carlos. This could change everything." Rosa looked at her with concern. "Valentina won't let you in easily, but I know you have to try. Take this," she said, handing her a copy of the house keys, "just in case you need to come back." Patricia thanked Rosa and quickly left for the hospital. She knew she would face resistance, but she couldn't give up. Upon arriving at the hospital, she was stopped by security. "I'm sorry, miss. You can't enter without authorization," said one of the guards. "Please, you have to listen to me. It's urgent. I need to see Mr. Carlos. His life is in danger," Patricia pleaded, but the guards didn't budge. At that moment, Dr. Rodriguez, Carlos's physician, appeared in the hallway. He recognized Patricia and approached them. "What's going on here?" he asked, noticing the tension. "Dr. Rodriguez, I need to see Carlos." "It's urgent," Patricia explained quickly, her voice laced with desperation. Dr. Rodriguez, sensing the gravity of the situation, nodded. "Let her through. I'll take responsibility." The guards, though reluctant, obeyed the doctor and allowed Patricia to enter. Dr. Rodriguez accompanied her to Carlos's room, where he lay in bed, weak but conscious. "Patricia, you arrived just in time," Carlos said, his voice weak but relieved to see her enter. "I'm here, Carlos. Everything will be all right," Patricia responded, gently taking his hand. Carlos looked terrible. His skin was pale and cold, and his breathing was shallow and labored. Patricia felt a pang of pain seeing him so fragile. "Doctor, please, do something," Patricia implored Dr. Rodriguez. "He can't go on like this." Dr. Rodriguez quickly examined Carlos and gave orders to the nurses. "We need to stabilize him. Get me the resuscitation equipment." As the medical team worked frantically around Carlos, Patricia retreated to a corner of the room, her hands trembling and her heart racing. She closed her eyes and began to pray silently, remembering all the moments she had shared with Carlos. Every conversation, every smile, and every look of understanding flashed through her mind, strengthening her resolve not to give up. Time seemed to stand still as the doctors fought to save Carlos. Patricia felt like every second was an eternity. The sounds of the monitors and the urgent commands of the doctors echoed through the room, creating an atmosphere of tension and despair. Finally, after what felt like forever, Dr. Rodriguez turned to Patricia with a grave expression. "We've done everything we can. Now, we can only wait." Patricia nodded, feeling the weight of uncertainty crush her. She approached Carlos's bed and knelt beside him, gently taking his hand. "Carlos, please hold on. We need you here. I need you," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. Time passed slowly, and Patricia continued to pray, recalling every detail of her life, seeking strength in those memories. She felt a deep connection with Carlos, a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. Night fell, and the room fell silent. Patricia, exhausted from worry and lack of sleep, began to feel faint. Her vision blurred, and before she could react, she collapsed to the floor, losing consciousness. When Patricia woke up, she found herself in a hospital bed, with tubes and monitors surrounding her. The morning light filtered through the window, creating a peaceful but unfamiliar atmosphere. A headache pounded in her head, and it took her a few seconds to remember where she was and why. "Where am I?" she murmured, her voice barely audible. Dr. Rodriguez appeared beside her, his expression relieved. "You're in the hospital, Patricia. You fainted last night from stress and lack of rest. You needed urgent medical attention." Patricia tried to sit up, but pain and weakness forced her to stay in bed. "Carlos. How is Carlos?" Dr. Rodriguez sighed. "He's stable for now, but still in critical condition. We've done everything we can for him." Patricia nodded, feeling a mix of relief and worry. "I need to see him. Please, let me see him." "You need to rest, Patricia. You can't help him if you're this weak yourself," the doctor said gently. "Please, just for a moment. I need to be with him," Patricia insisted, her eyes filled with determination. Dr. Rodriguez, seeing the desperation on her face, relented. "All right, I'll take you to his room, but only for a moment." With the doctor's help, Patricia was taken to Carlos's room. As she entered, she felt a wave of emotions wash over her as she saw Carlos still fighting for his life. She approached his bedside and took his hand, whispering words of encouragement and hope. "Carlos, I'm here. Don't give up. We're going to get through this together," she said, her voice full of love and determination. Carlos slowly opened his eyes, and upon seeing Patricia, a weak smile spread across his face. "Patricia, I knew you'd come back." "Always, Carlos." "I won't leave you," Patricia responded, gently squeezing his hand. And time seemed to stand still as Patricia sat by Carlos's side. She remembered the photograph she had found in his house and decided it was the right time to talk about it. "Carlos, there's something important I need to tell you," Patricia began, her voice trembling slightly. "While I was looking for evidence to help you, I found a photograph in your house. It was a picture of a little girl with green eyes. Eyes like mine." Carlos looked at her intently, his expression shifting from curiosity to astonishment. "Patricia, that girl is my daughter Sophia. She disappeared many years ago." Patricia nodded, taking a deep breath before continuing. "Carlos, I think that girl is me. I grew up in an orphanage and never knew my parents. The caregivers at the orphanage used to take a lot of pictures of me when I was little, and that photo I found in your house is one of them." Carlos stared at her, his eyes filled with emotion and hope. "Are you saying you could be my daughter?" "Yes, Carlos. I believe I am Sophia," Patricia replied, feeling a wave of emotions wash over her as she spoke. "We need to do a DNA test to be sure." Dr. Rodriguez, who had been observing the conversation silently, spoke up. "We can do the test right here. We need a sample from both of you. If this turns out to be true, it changes everything." As they prepared the samples for analysis, Patricia and Carlos shared stories and memories, trying to fill in the gaps in their lives. The wait for the results was agonizing, but they both knew it was necessary. Hours later, Dr. Rodriguez returned, an envelope in his hand. "The results are in," he said, handing it to Carlos. With trembling hands, Carlos opened the envelope and read the contents. Tears welled up in his eyes as he looked up at Patricia. "It's true. You are my daughter, my Sophia." Patricia felt a surge of emotions: joy, relief, disbelief. They embraced, crying together over lost time and a family reunited. As they recovered from the shock, Carlos decided to tell Patricia the truth about Valentina. Patricia, there's something you need to know. Valentina has been manipulating me for a long time. Her interest has always been money. Since she learned that my health was deteriorating, she's been trying to make sure that my entire estate goes to her. Patricia looked at him, understanding now the urgency and danger she had sensed from the beginning. We can't let her get away with this, Carlos. We have to act. Carlos nodded, his eyes reflecting his newfound determination. We need proof. We know Valentina has been manipulating things in her favor, but without concrete evidence, we can't stop her. Patricia remembered the box of documents she had seen in Carlos's office. I think there might be something in your files. We need to go through them carefully and find anything that could incriminate Valentina. Dr. Rodriguez, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. I can help you with that. I know a trustworthy lawyer who can guide us through this process. We need to do this legally and ensure that Valentina can't manipulate anything further. The following days were a blur of recovery and strategizing. Patricia and Carlos, with the help of Dr. Rodriguez and the lawyer, began gathering all the evidence they could. They went through every document, every transaction, and every communication that could reveal Valentina's true intentions. Finally, with enough evidence in hand, they decided to confront Valentina. The lawyer filed a court order to freeze Carlos's assets, preventing Valentina from accessing them until the investigation was complete. On the day of the confrontation, Valentina was summoned to a meeting at the mansion. As she entered the room, she found Carlos, Patricia, Dr. Rodriguez, and the lawyer waiting for her. Her expression shifted from surprise to fury in an instant. What is the meaning of this? Valentina demanded. Carlos, with a calmness he hadn't displayed in a long time, responded. Valentina, we've discovered your intentions. We have proof of your manipulations and your attempts to secure my estate for yourself. You will no longer control me or my fortune. Valentina tried to defend herself, but the evidence was overwhelming. The lawyer presented every document, every suspicious transaction, and every attempt by Valentina to divert funds. You can't do this to me, Valentina cried out, her voice laced with desperation. I have been by your side all this time. For all the wrong reasons, Patricia interjected firmly. Your interest was never in Carlos, only in his money. Now, everything will come to light. Valentina was taken away by the authorities, and the mansion suddenly felt lighter, as if a shadow had been lifted. Patricia and Carlos, though aware of the challenges that still lay ahead, felt a sense of relief and hope for the first time in a long time. The following days were filled with change and adaptation. Carlos slowly began to show signs of recovery. With each passing day, his strength gradually returned, thanks in part to Patricia's diligent and loving care. Their connection deepened, and the father-daughter relationship they had begun to build blossomed with every conversation and gesture of mutual support. One morning, as Carlos was resting in the living room, Patricia entered with a breakfast tray. "Good morning, Dad," she said with a smile. Carlos looked up, surprised and touched to hear her call him that for the first time. "Good morning, my daughter," Carlos replied, his eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you for everything you've done for me." "It's the least I could do," Patricia said, taking a seat beside him. "I want you to make a full recovery. We have so much to do together." Over time, Patricia became more involved in Carlos's business. The pharmaceutical company, which had been under Valentina's control, was in dire need of restructuring. Together, they began working on new projects, focusing on developing innovative medicines and implementing protection programs for vulnerable individuals. Carlos admired Patricia's dedication and passion for helping others. "You have a gift, Patricia," he told her one day, as they were reviewing documents in his office. "Your experience as a nurse and your compassion for others are invaluable to this company." Patricia smiled, feeling a sense of pride. "I want this company to make a real difference in the world. I want it to be a place where people feel safe and supported." Under Patricia's guidance, the company launched a training program for nurses focusing on the identification and prevention of domestic abuse. Patricia became a leader in the field, and her program was widely recognized and adopted by other healthcare institutions. Carlos, seeing the positive impact of his daughter's efforts, felt more inspired than ever. "We're doing something truly good here, Patricia," he said one day as they looked over the latest reports. "I'm so proud of you." "And I'm proud of you, Dad," Patricia replied, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction for everything they had accomplished together. In time, Carlos's company became renowned for its social contributions. They created a safe and supportive environment for their employees and the community at large. Patricia's initiatives, in particular, received accolades and recognition, and she soon began receiving invitations to share her expertise at conferences and seminars. One day, after a particularly successful conference, Patricia received an offer to write a book about her life and work. The idea of sharing her story with a wider audience both excited and intimidated her. "Dad, I've been asked to write a book about our story," Patricia said, nervous but excited. Carlos smiled, beaming with pride. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Patricia. You have an incredible story to tell, and I'm sure it will inspire many people." With Carlos's support, Patricia accepted the offer and began working on her book. As she wrote, she relived every significant moment of her life, from the challenges of the orphanage to the reunion with her father and her work at the pharmaceutical company. Each word she wrote was a testament to her struggles, her growth, and her determination to make a difference in the world. The publication of the book was a resounding success. Patricia received praise and recognition for her bravery and her dedication to helping others. Her story touched the hearts of many and became a source of inspiration for those facing similar difficulties. With the truth finally revealed, and Valentina facing the consequences of her actions, Patricia and Carlos began rebuilding their lives. Together, they focused on healing and cherishing each moment, knowing that despite the pain and hardships they had endured, they had found something truly precious: family and a fresh start filled with purpose and compassion. As they looked towards the horizon together, Patricia and Carlos knew that the road ahead would hold its share of challenges, but also hope and love. And with that, they were ready to face whatever the future held, confident that together they could overcome any obstacle. Patricia and Carlos's journey in this story is deeply moving and filled with valuable life lessons. Patricia's transformation from a lonely and struggling nurse to a devoted daughter and leader in her field is a testament to human resilience and the capacity to overcome adversity. Throughout her journey, Patricia faces immense challenges, from fighting to save Carlos to confronting Valentina's manipulations. Her determination and courage not only save her father, but also transform a company, turning it into a beacon of hope and support for many. The relationship between Patricia and Carlos, once lost and then rediscovered, highlights the importance of family and the power of human connection. Their bond, forged amidst pain and adversity, demonstrates that love and faith can overcome even the most difficult situations. The story teaches us that although the path may be filled with obstacles, perseverance, integrity, and genuine love can lead us to a future filled with hope and possibilities. Patricia and Carlos remind us that it's never too late to uncover the truth, heal old wounds, and build a new beginning filled with purpose and compassion. If you found this story as moving as we did, please like and comment to let us know how it made you feel. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other meaningful stories.